Thanksgiving falls on the 4th November of each year. Traditions date from the time of the Protestant Reformation, and in the US, celebrations include the much looked forward to Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Ever since the first parade organized by Macy's in 1924, it is tradition to watch some amazing things pass you by. Wishing you a happy Thanksgiving. Welcome to Kaleidoscope with me, Savithri Rodrigo, where we're positive, daring, different. A huge thank you to our wonderful partners, Srilanka Life, CDB, Zip and The Daily Morning for being absolutely amazing. Kaleidoscope is on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn, and if you like our show, subscribe and follow for weekly updates.
CDB Hybrid Leasing. Enjoy exclusive interest rate and much more for hybrids, plug-in hybrids and EV vehicles.
And now a quick look at the week that was on CDB Snapshot. The Inland Revenue Department's fined 16 million potential taxpayers among citizens over 18, and close to 200,000 new taxpayers register in 2023. The central bank intends to move towards a full floating exchange rate. Fitch reveals that rising gold loans in the NBFI sector exposes it to higher risks. The WHO declares loneliness a pressing global health threat, saying mortality effects are equal to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. The world's most sought-after Scotch whisky, the Macallan 1926, sells for more than $2.7 million US.
You focus on your goals. We will take care of the risks. Srilanka Life.
Welcome, this is Srilanka Life News Capsule. Sri Lanka's President Ranil Wickremesinghe declared that he was bolstering the country's economy by positioning Sri Lanka as a smart nation. He launched the Smart Nation initiative on the theme Smart Country 2048. While it seems a reasonable enough timeline, there are some questions. Cybersecurity professional and technocrat Asela Vaidyalankara met up with me at Cinnamon Lakeside for some answers.
Now, there's much discussion about making Sri Lanka a smart nation. Are we ready?
We should have been ready. We should have been ready yesterday. But to make a smart nation, there's a series of steps that we have to take. And there's a huge few gaps that we have to fill. In that essence, we need to move in haste and make sure we close that gap and fill those holes. There's a lot of will and commitment required to make sure we see through.
Prioritizing the changes, what should they be?
Policy consistency is the first one. Secondly, we need to relook at some of our legislation. By design, they are made in an era where we had paper-based data. If we are to move towards a smart nation, a digital economy, we need to probably relook at how we store and transmit information within the public sector, especially. And in order to do that, we need to talk reform in terms of legislation, reform in terms of cutting the red tape, bureaucrats looking at it in a very different light, policymakers being forward-thinking, as well as citizens being more digitally savvy and aware.
And what are the bottlenecks that you see we will come across?
Sri Lanka as a whole has an issue with policy consistency. We need to make sure that the policies we discuss today are well accepted, and even when there's a change in terms of government or in terms of heads of state, certainly those policies continue, because we have to be further long thinking, at least a decade ahead. We need to plan. And if we do that and we are committed to those policies, certainly we can achieve the changes that we sought to achieve and elevate Sri Lanka's position to a place where we are competitive and sought after by our regional peers.
Looking ahead, if we meet these aspirations, what are the benefits the country will see?
We will see a more efficient and transparent public sector. We will see a robust governance. We see transparency. We'll see less corruption. We will see agility within the private sector, government sector, which is akin to the private sector. So these are some of the benefits that citizens can get. So I think this is the mindset change we need to start with, and the tremendous benefits that we'll reap once we get to that destination will propel our country and will propel our development forward.
And now for the status of stock, oil and gold. The oil share price index at the Colombo Stock Exchange continued its downward slide this week, losing 140 billion rupees in value. Oil prices continued to trade at below $84 per barrel on reduced demand. Gold prices fell below $2,000 per ounce as the US currency stabilized after its recent drop. Nepal is honoring their doggos in a celebration named Kukur Tihar. All dogs are treated like royalty, bathed in fragrance and color, and worshipped to please Yama, the god of the dead, for whom dogs are messengers. This month is International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. It's no secret that COVID-19 and lockdowns led to an increase in domestic violence and intimate partner violence in the world. But in Sri Lanka, even before the pandemic, 1 in 5 women had experienced sexual and physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime, and 1 in 4 women had experienced violence since the age of 15. Clearly, women in our country don't have it any easier. And this month, I want to place a spotlight on the issues plaguing the women in Sri Lanka. Here with me today is Ambika Satkunanathan, human rights lawyer and activist, who was Commissioner of the National Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka. She's also an expert in transitional justice, accountability and reconciliation, and she's here to talk about the plight of women in Sri Lanka today when it comes to violence against women. There's a lot of rhetoric when it comes to eliminating violence against women, but little action in Sri Lanka. Why is it so difficult to tackle this problem?
It is about our values. It is about the position of women in society. We are a deeply patriarchal society. People don't even want to use that word. They're so frightened. Patriarchal means it's a male-dominated society, and women, despite the fact that in our constitution it says that everyone is equal before the law, you should be treated equally, and that you cannot discriminate on the basis of one person's sex. We are. Right? And that is something that is deeply ingrained in our systems, our institutions, and our values. So much so that when you question discrimination of a woman in terms of maybe in a workplace, even in terms of sexual harassment, or even family violence. So it is because we refuse to tackle the root causes, which is patriarchy, inequality, discrimination, that it is so difficult to tackle it, even if we pass laws or set up new institutions.
Do you think Sri Lanka has failed its women?
Not only Sri Lanka, I think globally, generally, most countries have and continue to fail their women. Sri Lanka is one of them. Even regionally, if you look the regional countries, yes, but we are even behind where the region is concerned. For instance, where women's political representation is concerned, we are one of the lowest. So I would say we definitely have failed our women.
What type of violence are we looking at that women actually face the most today in Sri Lanka?
Problem that we have is we actually don't also have clear statistics on this. And one of the reasons is that not everything is reported. Actually, what is reported is just the tip of the iceberg. But from the cases that we see, we know that family violence is something that is very common, or domestic violence. And of course, there's also psychological violence. Then we have sexual abuse of young girls, of girl children. We have that, we have incest, we have sexual harassment, and sexual harassment is actually widespread. It is normalized, and women also don't have redress, because you can say, oh, well, go and lodge a complaint, but if you're harassed on the street, how are you supposed to go lodge a complaint at the police station? How on earth are they even going to find this person? Plus, punishing people doesn't always solve the problem, because these are deeply ingrained values that start from the home. It's carried to school, university, workplace, and society. So we must tackle it there, in the home. at the school, and also structural violence. The discrimination, the patriarchy, sexism, and misogyny is so ingrained in the structures because this behavior, these values are ingrained in the structures that their normal way of functioning is to discriminate.
From your work in the National Human Rights Commission, what has been shocking when you look at the justice system in Sri Lanka, especially justice for women?
I think I'm at a point in my life where nothing shocks me. It is deeply disappointing. We can say it is depressing, it is disheartening, but it's not surprising. And it is the fact that the criminal justice system itself is deeply patriarchal. Because if a woman, it's not just going to the police and having a complaint accepted. Even in court, the way that women are treated, the way the defense counsel, the questions they ask you, they try to humiliate you. And at that time, what kind of action is, what's the response of the judicial officer there? So at every stage, she's not treated with respect or dignity and does not have protection from violence, abuse, discrimination. And as I, once again, the way that women are treated by the criminal justice sector is also structural.
As women, what would be our priorities then?
It is the duty of men. They have to take responsibility because they are the ones most often, not always, but most often perpetrating the violence. They are the ones holding the power. They are the ones in parliament. They are the ones in the police. You have very few women police officers, and even the women police officers themselves face harassment. When we talk of programs to combat sexual and gender-based violence, you do need to include men and particularly young boys, because the boys are like sponges. They are taking in patriarchal, sexist, misogynist values in society, and then they reproduce them. So then we have no hope if even the younger generation is going to be following in the footsteps of what's going on now. It's a responsibility of men. Men really do need to step up.
Today we delve into a book written by one of our regular guests, Rohan Pettiagoda, who is not only a public policy advocate, but also a conservationist, a biodiversity scientist, a freshwater fish taxonomist, and the Lenin Medal winner 2022, considered the Nobel Prize for Naturalists. Rohan Pettiagoda describes his latest book, Green Gold, The Discovery of Sri Lanka's Biodiversity, published by Dilma Conservation, as the collation of a lifetime worth of scrapping. But it's way more than that. It is a lifetime of research and of countless visits to overseas museums, archives, libraries, and graveyards. Together with the Western Ghats of India, Sri Lanka is part of a global biodiversity hotspot with an extraordinary wealth of species. But the description of Sri Lanka's biodiversity began with European colonization, where tens of thousands of plants and animals were collected, preserved, described, and illustrated. The colonists then delved into the island's famous pearl fishery, resulting in world-famous zoologists coming to the island. Sri Lanka was also among the first biotas ever to be explored. In fact, by 1864, the island had the only completed flora of any tropical region in the world. The book holds a treasure trove of historical information and anecdotes, very well-researched biographies of dozens of botanists and zoologists, including the famed ornithologist who worked in Sri Lanka, William Vincent Legge, naturalists G.M.R. Henry and W.W.A. Phillips, Haramanisti Alvis, a humble draftsman who spent his life illustrating plants of Sri Lanka, the gay Swiss cousins Paul and Fritz Saracen, who slaughtered countless elephants and raided Vadda graves in the name of science, and Swiss sexologist Augustus Forel, who opened wide the knowledge of ants in Sri Lanka. Green Gold is a journey of exploration of how the island's impressive biodiversity inventory was built, from colonial times to post-independence, and how even science became nationalized. Scrapping this is not, but rather a legacy of the journey of Sri Lanka's biodiversity history. This weekend, watch the Macy's Parade and give thanks for good things. We'll see you next week.